The snow had settled like a shroud over the Cade ranch, thick and quiet. Elias Cade rode the northern fence line with his collar turned high, breath steaming in the brittle air. The storm had blown through hard and fast the night before, tearing down wire and burying calves. Now it left only silence, and a strange unease that trailed him like a second shadow. His sorrel mare, Maybelle, jerked her head left, ears twitching. That's when he saw it, a pale shape tangled in scrub brush near the tree line. For a heartbeat he thought it was a deer carcass, half covered in frost. But then it moved. Elias dismounted, boots crunching through the crusted snow. Closer now, he saw the shape was a woman. She was curled in on herself, arms wrapped tight around something bundled beneath her coat. Her dress was soaked through and clung to her legs like wet paper. The coat she wore was thin, meant for walking to church or fetching bread, not surviving a blizzard. Her bonnet had slipped back, hair tangled and stiff with ice. One glove was missing, the other clutched a cloth bundle to her chest like a lifeline. Her lips were cracked, bluish, her face blotched red from the cold. She looked like she'd been dropped here by God himself and forgotten. "Ma'am?" Elias knelt beside her, keeping his voice low, like talking to a spooked horse. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, green, sharp, wild. She flinched away from him, lips parting, but no sound came. Just fog. Then she collapsed. Elias let out a breath through his nose, low and tight. Hell. He hesitated, hands hovering. He didn't know this woman, didn't know what she was running from or toward. The last time he helped someone bleeding in the dirt, it nearly got him hanged. But she wasn't going to last long out here. That much was clear. He gathered her gently, her body slack and trembling. She was warmer than she should have been for someone near frozen. That wasn't a good sign. As he lifted her into the saddle, her head slumped against his chest. The scent of lavender and wood smoke rose off her skin, and something else underneath. Something panicked. His arms tightened instinctively. Her breath ghosted across his neck. "You picked the wrong damn stretch of fence to die near," he muttered, swinging into the saddle behind her. As Maybelle started toward home, Elias looked back once. The snow behind them was already swallowing her tracks. No one would have found her out here. Maybe that's what she wanted. Still, something twisted in his gut. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he felt it all the same. This woman was trouble, and he was already too close. The cabin was warm, but the silence inside it cut deep. Elias laid her gently on the bed, his bed, the only one in the place. Her skin was clammy and pale, and her soaked dress clung to her like a second skin. He stoked the fire higher until orange light danced across the walls and shadows stretched like claws across the floor. She didn't stir. "Don't die now," he muttered under his breath, pouring a tin cup of water and setting it by the bedside. "Not after all that." He stripped off his coat, then draped a heavy quilt over her. Still she shivered. Her lips moved, barely audible. Elias leaned closer. "What's that?" She flinched so violently he almost fell backward. Her eyes flew open, wild and unfocused. "You're all right," he said, holding up his hands. "You're safe. You're at Cade Ranch." Her breathing slowed, but her eyes stayed on him like a cornered animal. She tried to sit up, winced, and collapsed back into the pillow. "Where?" Her voice rasped like gravel. "Where am I?" "You tell me first," Elias said quietly. "What were you doing out there dressed like that?" She swallowed hard. I got turned around. I was traveling west. My wagon overturned. The driver." She shook her head. "He left." It was a lie. Elias could smell it. But it wasn't the kind of lie that begged for correction. It was the kind that curled up behind a locked door and dared you to knock. "Name?" he asked. She paused too long. "Grace." "No last name. Just Grace." He nodded slowly. "Well, Grace, you're lucky I was out riding fences. Another hour and the coyotes might have found you first." She looked away. "Wouldn't be the worst thing." Elias didn't answer. He stood and crossed to the hearth, grabbed a rag, dipped it in warm water, and wrung it out. Then, without a word, he returned and knelt beside the bed, gently pressing the cloth to her face. She winced at first, then let him. Her skin was soft beneath the grime, but her eyes never softened. She didn't trust him. And honestly, he didn't trust her either. A quiet knock tapped at the cabin door. It opened before he could answer. Ruthie stepped in, wiping her hands on her apron, eyes narrowing the moment she saw the woman in the bed. "Well," she said flatly, "ain't that a fine surprise?" "She's half dead, Ruthie." "She's half something, all right." Elias shot her a look. "She stays until she's well." Ruthie's gaze lingered on Grace, judging, reading, seeing what Elias wouldn't. Then she turned back to the door. "Your ranch, your rules." She left without another word. Grace turned her face toward the fire, eyes unreadable. "I won't stay long." Elias sat down in the chair by the bed and folded his arms. "You will, until I know you're strong enough to walk." He leaned back, jaw set, staring into the flames. And even then, he thought, you might not walk far. The third morning, she spoke more than 3 words. Elias was spooning oats into a pan on the stove, his back to the bed, when her voice broke the silence. "Your name?" He turned. She was propped up on one elbow, cheeks still pale but no longer ghostly. Her hair, now clean, framed her face in loose curls. Her eyes, those sharp green things, watched him like she'd been awake far longer than he thought. "Elias," he said, setting the spoon down. "Elias Cade." She nodded once. "Grace." There it was again. That pause. Just enough to be noticed, not enough to be called out. "Grace what?" Her fingers twitched against the blanket. "Just Grace." "All right then," he said. "Just Grace it is." They didn't speak much while she ate, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was cautious, measured. Elias had always preferred silence to lies. She winced with every movement. Her ribs were bruised, though she wouldn't say how. Her left ankle was tender but not broken. She took small bites and never let the spoon clink the bowl. By the time she'd eaten half, Ruthie stepped in carrying a pile of clean linens and a basket of cut wood. Her eyes narrowed the moment she caught Grace upright. "Well," she said flatly, "seems the snow didn't take her." Grace looked away. Elias stiffened. "Easy, Ruthie. I'm just saying, folks don't usually make it 2 nights near frozen unless they've got reason to." Grace's jaw tensed, but she said nothing. Ruthie continued onto the hearth and dropped the wood. "I found that fence post by the ridge," she said. "Looks like someone cut it, not wind damage. Boot tracks, too. Man size." Elias looked over. "North Ridge?" Ruthie nodded. "Didn't recognize the print." Grace sat a little straighter, lips parting like she wanted to ask, but didn't. After Ruthie left, Elias busied himself mending a saddle strap. Grace watched him from the bed, her gaze trailing the veins in his forearms, the set of his jaw. Something in the quiet strength of him unsettled her. "What is this place?" she asked finally. "Cade Ranch, about 20 miles north of Ash Hollow." Her eyes flickered. He caught it. "You know it?" "No," she said too fast. "Just heard of it." He raised a brow, said nothing, then stood and motioned toward the door. "Come on, you need to stretch. Cabin's small and your muscles'll turn to mush if you don't move 'em." She hesitated. "You want me to go outside?" He held up a heavy coat, his old one, and a pair of worn boots. "Not far, just to the porch." Grace put them on slowly. The boots were too big. The coat swallowed her. Elias opened the door and she stepped into the cold sunlight. Her breath caught. It was beautiful. White hills rolled in every direction. Pines stood tall in the distance, and the air smelled like clean snow and wood smoke. Elias leaned against the porch rail, arms crossed. She stood beside him, looking out. "It's quiet," she said softly. He nodded. "It usually is." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she turned to him. "Why'd you help me?" He looked at her, long and slow. because something in your eyes said you didn't want to be found. And because deep down, something in him didn't want to be alone. By morning, the sky had turned to slate, and snow had begun to fall again, slow and heavy, blanketing the landscape in silence. The kind of storm that didn't scream, just settled in and stayed. Elias leaned against the doorframe, watching the wind stack drifts against the barn. "Looks like we're snowed in," he muttered. Grace sat at the table, cradling a chipped mug between her hands. She'd been quiet all morning, only nodding when he spoke. She wore a plain wool dress Ruthie had found in an old chest, too big in the shoulders, too tight at the waist. Still, something about the way she moved in it made Elias's throat tighten. Inside the cabin, the walls felt closer. The fire hissed and snapped, throwing flickering shadows across the rough log walls. Ruthie moved with the quiet clatter of cooking, never looking directly at Grace unless she had to, and when she did, it wasn't kind. Elias picked up a piece of tack to mend, but couldn't keep his eyes on it. Every time Grace shifted, every time her fingers brushed a stray curl from her cheek, something in him tugged taut. The storm howled once, rattling the shutters. Grace flinched. "You all right?" Elias asked without looking up. She nodded, though her knuckles stayed white around the mug. "Storms? I don't like 'em much," Ruthie snorted from the stove. "A woman alone out here best learn to like worse things than storms." Elias shot her a look. Grace didn't rise to it. She just stood, slow and graceful, and walked to the hearth. The firelight licked her cheeks pink, her eyes reflecting the flames. She held her hands out to warm them. Elias found himself watching her again. "You play?" she asked suddenly, glancing at the old guitar propped in the corner. He blinked. "Not in a while." "I used to sing," she said, barely above a whisper. "Before." "Before what?" Ruthie asked, turning with a spoon in hand. Grace met her eyes, steady and unreadable. "Before everything broke." Silence settled thick. Later, Elias showed her how to chop kindling out back, beneath the overhang of the barn. The snow was coming in sideways now, stinging their faces. She struggled with the axe, her ankles still weak, hands unsteady. "Here," he said, stepping behind her. "Don't grip it like it's going to bite you." She leaned back just slightly into him, the heat of her pressed against his chest. He reached forward, guiding her hands. Her hair brushed his jaw. His voice lowered. "Let the axe do the work." She tilted her head up toward him, breath warm on his chin. "And if I don't want to let go?" For a moment, the only sound was the wind, the hiss of snow falling off the eaves, and both of their breathing. He stepped back like he'd been burned. "You should get inside." She looked at him, something unreadable flashing behind her eyes. Then she nodded and walked away, the axe dragging at her side. Elias stood there long after she was gone, heart hammering like he'd just dodged a bullet. Maybe he had. Elias wasn't looking for it. He didn't go through her things. He wasn't that kind of man. But the locket slipped from her coat pocket while she was asleep, landing on the floor with the softest metallic click. He wouldn't have even noticed it if the fire hadn't caught the edge just right. He picked it up. It was silver, dull and worn, with a fine crack running through the middle like a scar. The clasp was weak. When he opened it, the hinge stuck before giving with a quiet snap. Inside was a tiny faded photograph. A man and woman, arms around each other, smiling but not in a joyful way, in a way that felt rehearsed. The man looked sharp, clean cut, his eyes cold, mouth tight. The woman beside him, Grace, looked younger, but the same wariness hung around her eyes even then. Elias's gut twisted. He snapped it shut. The sound didn't wake her, but it made him feel like he'd fired a gun in the room. He returned the locket to the table and stepped out into the snow. The sky was still low, still gray. He breathed deep, tried to shake the crawling feeling in his chest. He told himself it didn't matter. She had a past. Hell, everyone did. But this was different. This was hidden. She hadn't once mentioned a man, not once said his name. And now, this? When he came back in, she was still sleeping. Her brow furrowed, her lips parted slightly, one hand tucked under her cheek. He stared at her for a long moment before finally walking back over and setting the locket gently on the table beside her. Later that morning, she found it, her face drained of color. He didn't say a word. She sat at the edge of the bed, the locket tight in her fist. "You went through my things." "I didn't," he said. "It fell. I saw it. That's all." "Did you open it?" His silence was answer enough. Her shoulders rose, then dropped. "It's not what you think." "No?" he asked, arms crossed. "'Cause what I think is, you've got a man out there somewhere who's probably looking for you." Her jaw tightened. "It's not like that." "Then how is it?" She didn't answer. He shook his head. "You're not giving me a lot of reason to trust you." She looked up at him then, sharp, bitter. "Trust goes both ways, Elias. You keep your boots by the door, your gun in the drawer, and your heart locked up in your damn chest. So don't talk to me about trust." The words hit harder than a fist. She stood and walked to the window, turning her back to him. And that was the first time Elias Cade truly didn't know whether he wanted to kiss her or walk out the door. Instead, he did neither. He just said, "Ruthie was right. You are hiding something." And Grace didn't deny it. Elias didn't like bringing strangers into town, especially ones with secrets stitched into their seams. But they were running low on coffee, lamp oil, and bullets, and Ruthie had made it real clear she wasn't going. So he hitched the wagon and told Grace to bundle up. The ride down into Ash Hollow was quiet. Gray skies hung low. The trail was mud and half-thawed ice, slick under the horses' hooves. Grace sat stiff beside him, her gloved hands clutched tight in her lap. She hadn't said much since the locket. "You ain't gotta be scared," Elias finally said. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you here." She didn't look at him. "That's not what I'm afraid of." He let that sit. Ash Hollow wasn't much to look at. A crooked main street, 2 saloons, a post office, and a general store that smelled like molasses and dust. But today, even that felt sharp. The moment Grace stepped down from the wagon, eyes turned. A few folks nodded to Elias. Most just stared at her. She kept her head down. Inside the general store, Elias grabbed what he needed: flour, tobacco, coffee, a box of cartridges. Grace stood near the stove, hands out, soaking in the warmth. But her eyes flicked to the door every few seconds like a hunted animal. That's when Elias noticed the wanted posters. 2 of them, one for a cattle rustler, one for a woman. His stomach dropped. He stepped closer. The sketch was rough, not a perfect likeness. But the shape of the jaw, the set of the eyes, it was her. No name, just a note. Wanted, for attempted murder and theft. Dangerous. Approach with caution. Elias felt the air go thin. He turned to Grace. She was frozen, staring straight at it. "Don't look at it," he muttered under his breath. "Come on." They paid and stepped out into the muddy street. Elias could feel the storekeeper's eyes on their backs. He glanced once over his shoulder. The man didn't wave, just disappeared into the back and shut the door. On the wagon ride home, Grace didn't speak until they were out past the river bend. "I didn't do what they said. I didn't ask. But you're thinking it." He kept his eyes on the road. "I'm thinking a lot of things." Silence stretched between them. Then, soft and nearly swallowed by the wind, she said, "Sometimes the law don't care about what really happened. They just care about who's louder. And he's louder." "Who?" She looked away. "You'll find out." Back in Ash Hollow, behind the shuttered window of the general store, a man pulled out a telegraph sheet. He scribbled a note in firm block letters. "Woman matches description, heading west, traveling with rancher." Then he sent it. Somewhere, a machine clicked to life, and a man with a scar beneath his left eye smiled as he read the message. The wind was mean that day, spitting ice down from the hills, rattling every loose board on the cabin. Elias had taken to cleaning out the barn loft, hoping motion would burn off the tension knotting his chest since Ash Hollow. He couldn't shake the image of the wanted poster, couldn't shake the fear behind Grace's eyes, couldn't shake the lie. After a while, he went inside to find more nails. Ruthie had gone to check the chicken coops, and Grace, Eleanor maybe, was out back hanging laundry under the gray sky. That's when he saw it. Ash. A scrap of something charred black curled in the stone hearth, still warm. Another piece sat tucked in the back corner, mostly intact. Elias knelt down, pulled it free, and unfolded the singed paper. It smelled of smoke and roses and something rotten underneath. It was a letter, longhand, shaky script, but clear enough. Silas, you don't own me. Not my voice, not my bones, not my name. If you love me, let me go. If you don't, then I'll die running. Elias's hands froze. There was more, but the bottom was burned too badly to read. Still, the words rang louder than a shotgun blast in his skull. Silas. The name felt like a boot on his chest. He stood there for a long while, letter trembling in his hand, until the cabin door creaked open behind him. Grace stepped in, cheeks red from the cold, her wet dress clinging to her legs, laundry basket hugged tight to her hip. Her eyes met his, saw the paper, saw the truth. She didn't drop the basket, but she might as well have. I burned it, she whispered. Not fast enough, Elias said. She looked away, jaw tightening. You weren't supposed to see that. You got a habit of keeping things from me, he said, voice low, trembling with something between anger and hurt. First the name, then the locket, now this. He's not a man, she said sharply. He's a monster, and I begged him. Do you see that? I begged him to stop. Elias stared at her, hands still clutching the half-burned letter. Did you try to kill him? Silence. Then, I tried to leave. That ain't what I asked. She looked up, eyes wet, jaw clenched. No, I tried to survive. The wind howled again outside, but inside it was deadly still. He folded the letter once, twice, then tucked it in the pocket of his coat. I need to know what I'm writing into, Grace, or Eleanor, or whoever the hell you really are. Her voice broke. I don't know who I am anymore. I just know who I ain't. I ain't his. Then prove it, Elias said. She looked at him like he'd just asked her to stop a train. I'm trying. No, he said, turning away, hand on the doorframe. You're surviving, and I respect that, but survival ain't the same as honesty. He left her standing there, letterless and shaking, in the warmth of a fire she no longer felt. The silence between them had turned sour. Since the letter, Elias hadn't said more than a handful of words to Grace. He worked longer outside, ate in silence, slept in the barn a couple nights, claiming the stove needed fixing out there. But she saw through that. She tried to help, kept busy folding linens, mending shirts, making meals, but nothing she did was right anymore. And that silence scraped at her like glass under skin. She needed answers, or maybe just something that felt like control. So one afternoon, when Ruthie had gone to town and Elias was out chopping wood, Grace slipped into the bedroom. His room smelled like pine and leather and tobacco. The bed was neatly made, the floor swept, but her eyes drifted to the small nightstand by the bed. The bottom drawer had a keyhole, scratched and worn. She pulled it slowly, locked, but something told her the key wouldn't be far. Sure enough, tucked under the folded shirts in his wardrobe, she found it. It clicked open with a soft metallic snap. Inside the drawer, a revolver, polished, loaded, engraved on the grip, SG. Beside it lay a folded paper. She didn't open it. She didn't have time. A floorboard creaked behind her. She froze. I figured you might snoop. His voice was low, flat, and cold. Grace turned slowly. Elias stood in the doorway, arms crossed, coat open, his shadow stretching long in the afternoon light. I was looking for what? He cut in. Another secret to steal? Another piece of me to twist into something that fits your story? Her chest heaved. You think I'm lying about everything? I think, he said, stepping closer, that you came here with blood on your hands and stories full of holes, and now you're in my house digging through drawers that don't belong to you. Her jaw clenched. You don't own me. No, he said quietly, but I saved your life. That ought to mean something. It does, she snapped. It means I trusted you enough to stay, to tell you pieces I've never told anyone. You didn't tell me. I found out. There's a difference. They stood in silence, breathing heavy, the space between them full of heat, not from the fire, but from the fire beneath their skin. Then her eyes dropped to the gun. Why do you have something with his initials? Elias stared at her, then reached past her, grabbed the revolver and held it up. It ain't his, he said. It's mine. But SG, Samuel Gideon, my brother, killed 2 years ago by the kind of man you say you ran from. Her breath caught. Elias returned the gun to the drawer and shut it with finality. I ain't stupid, Grace. I know you're scared. But don't mistake my silence for softness. I've killed for less than what I've let slide with you. She blinked back tears. Then why haven't you? He stared at her, eyes blazing. And when he spoke, it was quiet. Because I still want to believe there's a woman in there worth saving. Then he walked past her, close enough she could feel the heat off him, and left her alone in the room with the drawer shut tight. The snow returned 2 nights later, soft and mean, drifting in sideways through the trees like it was hunting something. Elias had been up late, pacing the front room of the cabin. The fire crackled, low and steady, but it didn't reach the hollowness in his chest. Grace, if that was even still her name, was asleep in the back room, or pretending to be. Ruthie had long since gone to her own quarters in the barn loft. He poured himself a drink from the bottle he only touched when the past wouldn't stay buried. Took one long pull, then another. That's when he heard it. Hoofbeats. Far off. Faint. But there. He stepped to the window. The wind had wiped clean most tracks from earlier, but the rhythm of those steps, steady, deliberate, didn't match any ranch hand or passing drifter. This wasn't a man in a hurry. It was a man scouting, watching, hunting. Elias didn't light the lantern, didn't move. He waited. The hoofbeats stopped near the ridge, then nothing. He stayed frozen for minutes, ears straining. Eventually, he set the glass down and slipped on his coat. He didn't take the rifle, didn't need to scare the others just yet, but he did tuck the revolver into the back of his waistband. Outside, the snow whispered under his boots. He followed the fence line toward the north ridge, the same one he'd found her near, the same one Ruthie had warned about. Halfway there, he found it. A single boot print. Deep, fresh, facing the cabin. He squatted, ran a gloved hand over it. Large, worn tread. Not one of his. Not Ruthie's. Not Grace's. His breath curled in front of him. A cold tighter than any winter set into his spine. When he returned to the cabin, Grace was waiting by the fire. She had a blanket wrapped around her, but her eyes were sharp and alert. You heard it too, she said. He nodded. She looked down at her hands. It's him. You don't know that. I do. Elias leaned against the door frame, snow melting from his shoulders. Why tonight? She shook her head. Because I stopped running. A silence stretched between them, the kind that felt final. Then she said, There's something else. He waited. I saw Ruthie yesterday, near the back fence, talking to someone. Elias straightened. Who? I don't know. I only saw the back of his coat. Black, long, looked like oilskin. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't want to believe it. Elias cursed under his breath, rubbing a hand down his jaw. If she's betrayed us, she might not know who he is. She knows enough. Outside, the wind picked up again. Inside, the fire hissed as a log shifted. Elias looked at her, really looked. The woman he pulled from the snow was still in there, but now she was steel-wrapped in silk, holding secrets that weighed more than bullets. We ride at first light, he said. She blinked. Where? To find the truth. And this time, she didn't argue. The sun rose behind a curtain of cloud, pale and cold. Elias saddled the horses in silence while Grace packed what little she had. Ruthie watched them from the porch, a bitter curl to her mouth, arms crossed like she was holding in judgment, or secrets. They didn't speak until they'd crossed the north ridge. The world beyond the ranch was crisp and white, unspoiled by boot prints or wagon ruts. Pines loomed like sentinels in the distance. The silence stretched between them so long it began to ache. Then, without looking at him, she said, "My name isn't Grace." Elias didn't flinch. He just kept his eyes on the trail. "I figured." She swallowed. "It's Eleanor. Eleanor St. James." That name struck like a snake bite. Familiar. Vicious. Elias pulled his horse to a stop, turning slowly to face her. "St. James," he said. "As in Silas St. James?" Her jaw trembled. "My husband." His hands balled into fists on the reins. "I didn't want you to know," she said softly, "because I knew what it would mean." Elias's voice came out low and dangerous. "You mean the same Silas St. James who runs guns for the rail companies? Who buried men alive in the Bighorn standoff and got a marshal killed with nothing more than a handshake?" She nodded. "I ran," she said. "After the last time Her voice cracked. "He came home drunk, accused me of things I never did, broke 3 ribs. I thought I was going to die. And when I woke up, I ran. Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I didn't want to drag you into it." He gave a bitter laugh. "Little late for that." Eleanor looked down. "I thought I could disappear. Thought maybe if I changed my name and kept my head down, I'd get to start over." Elias dismounted, boots crunching the frost-hardened ground. He paced once, twice, then looked up at her. "I've killed men for less than what you kept from me. I know. And yet I'm still here. I know." He stepped close, eyes burning into hers. "Why?" She met his gaze, trembling but unbroken. "Because you believe in right and wrong. Because somewhere in all that quiet rage of yours, you want to fix something that can't be fixed. And because—" She paused. "Because I think you saw me before I ever said a word." That silence again. Thick, sharp. Elias's voice came out softer. "Does he know where you are?" "I don't know." "Liar," he said, but without heat. She nodded. "Then yes, I think so." From the tree line behind them, a crow let out a harsh cry and took off. They both turned. Nothing yet, but something was coming. Elias turned back to her. "All right, Eleanor St. James," he said, the name bitter in his mouth. "Let's see what kind of widow you're going to be." She blinked. "What?" "Because I'm going to kill your husband." The sound of hooves came just after sunset. Elias had gone out back to chop the last of the day's wood. Ruthie was in the barn. Eleanor stood near the stove, staring into the pot of stew she hadn't stirred in 10 minutes. And then, the wind changed. Not just in direction, but in weight, in feel. The hooves slowed, stopped. She stepped to the window, hand trembling as she peeled back the curtain. There, just past the gate, sat a man atop a coal-black stallion. His coat was long and slick with trail dust, but what chilled her blood was the stillness, the control. 2 other riders flanked him like dogs off leash. Her breath caught. She backed away from the window like it burned. Elias came through the front door seconds later, snow on his shoulders, axe in hand. "I saw him," she whispered. He didn't ask who. He didn't have to. By the time Ruthie returned from the barn, the riders had dismounted. The one in the center, the one with the slow, precise steps, walked like he owned the dirt beneath him, like the world bent to his boots. He rapped once on the cabin door. Elias opened it. The man smiled. He was handsome in a knife-sharp way, not a line out of place, not a speck of dust on his gloves. "Well now," he drawled, voice smooth as snake oil. "You've been keeping something of mine." Elias didn't move. "What you think you lost, I don't think you ever had." The man's eyes darkened, but his smile didn't slip. "That's a bold thing to say to someone who doesn't miss." Behind him, the 2 riders shifted, hands near their holsters. Inside, Eleanor stepped forward. "Silas." His smile widened. "There's my girl." She flinched. I ain't yours, she said. No, he asked, stepping into the doorway. Then who do you belong to? This ranch hand? This man playing hero in the middle of nowhere? Ruthie stepped between them, eyes blazing. She don't belong to anyone. Silas looked her over, slow and mean. And who might you be? Someone who sees through men like you, he grinned. Careful, miss. That kind of talk can get you hurt. Elias stepped in front of Ruthie, blocking the doorway fully. You've made your point. Now ride out. Silas raised his eyebrows. Not without my wife. You lay a hand on her, Elias said, voice low, and I'll put you in the dirt so deep the worms'll ask questions. For a moment, the world stood still. Then Silas stepped back, brushing invisible dust from his coat. You've got until dawn. After that, I stop asking nice. He turned, whistled once. His men followed. But before he mounted, he looked over his shoulder at Eleanor, eyes flat, dead, and burning all at once. You always were good at running, he said. Let's see how far you make it this time. Then they rode off, hooves thudding like the war drums of hell. Inside the cabin, the fire popped, and no one breathed. The door slammed shut with a finality that sucked the air from the room. Silas stood in the cabin like a man inspecting a purchase. His black coat dripped melted snow onto the floorboards, his gloves still on, eyes never leaving Eleanor as he slowly circled the room. Smells like desperation in here, he said, nose twitching. And smoke. Funny how much of your life ends in fire, sweetheart. Eleanor stood rigid near the hearth, arms crossed, back straight. But she was shaking. Not with cold, but with the force of holding herself together. You said you'd come back, Silas went on, taking off his gloves. But you didn't, so I came to fetch you myself. I told you in the letter. You left me a pile of ash and a trail of shame. He stepped closer. She didn't move. You think running makes you clean? He asked, voice low now, almost tender. Think hiding in shacks with men like him makes you a new woman? I'm not your woman. He smiled then, slow and cruel. Oh, Ellie, you always were. From the barn loft, Ruthie watched through a crack in the wall. She'd seen Elias take a different trail toward town after Silas rode off, maybe to warn the sheriff, maybe to buy time. But now, Elias was gone, and the devil was in the cabin. She crept down the ladder, quiet as a ghost. Inside, Silas pulled something from his coat pocket and dropped it on the table, a silver cuff bracelet, slightly bent, the one he gave her after their wedding, the one he used to snap around her wrist when she got mouthy, so she'd remember who paid for the roof. Eleanor stared at it like it was a rattlesnake. You remember what you promised me? He whispered. You said, forever. Said, I do. You swore in front of God. I lied. No, he hissed. You meant it. You just forgot. So I'm here to remind you. He reached for her. She slapped his hand away. And for a second, just a second, his mask cracked. The backhand came fast, hard. She fell against the table, clutching her cheek. But she didn't cry, didn't scream. She stood and stared him down. That all you've got? She said. You think you can beat the fear back into me? I'm not that girl anymore. He grabbed her by the collar and shoved her into the chair. You're exactly who I say you are, he growled. And come morning, you'll leave with me, one way or the other. He turned, glancing toward the window. Now where's that hero of yours, the one who thinks he can save you? He laughed. That boy doesn't know what he's up against. From the shadows outside, Ruthie slipped back into the dark. Her hands trembled, but she gripped a small hunting knife in one. She had waited too long to speak, but she wouldn't wait to act. The knock on the cabin door came just after midnight. It wasn't loud, just 3 raps, slow and steady. Inside, Eleanor flinched, her face still stinging from Silas's earlier slap. She hadn't slept. Couldn't. The fire had burned low. Her fingers trembled near the poker, though she wasn't sure if she'd use it on Silas or herself if he came back through that door. Ruthie stood behind her, knife tucked up her sleeve. They exchanged a glance. Another knock. Then a voice. Eleanor? The sound hit her like thunder and snow. She ran to the door and yanked it open. Elias stood there, blood on his temple, mud on his coat, one arm hanging limp at his side. His horse, lathered and shaking, stood behind him. "Thought you were—" "I almost was," he muttered, stumbling inside. Ruthie caught his arm before he fell. Eleanor rushed to clear the table, grabbing a cloth and water, but Elias waved her off with a grunt. "What happened?" she asked, eyes scanning his wounds. "Got jumped," he said, easing into a chair with a groan. "Took the back trail into town. Never made it." "Silas?" "No. His men. Ambush was set. They wanted me out of the way." He looked up at her, eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. "And it damn near worked." Ruthie tightened her jaw. "They planned this." "Worse," Elias said. "Someone here helped them." The room went still. Eleanor looked from him to Ruthie, then back again. "What are you saying?" Ruthie asked. "I'm saying they knew exactly which trail I'd take, where I'd be, and when." "Could have guessed," Ruthie offered. "No," he said, voice quiet now. "No guesswork. They were waiting in the ravine. One of them even said my lady friend talks too loud." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "I didn't—" she started. "It wasn't her," Elias said, looking straight at Ruthie. Ruthie took a step back. "You watch yourself." Elias stood, wincing, but firm. "You've been in this from the start." "That's a lie." "You knew who she was before I ever brought her in," he said. "Didn't you?" Ruthie's face hardened, but the flicker of guilt was already there. "I worked in Silas's household before I came here," she said finally. "I knew her name, but I didn't know what she'd done." "She didn't do anything wrong?" Elias shouted, staggering forward. "I thought she'd bring trouble," Ruthie snapped. "And I was right." Eleanor stepped between them. "You told them where Elias would be?" Ruthie's silence answered for her. "I didn't think they'd hurt him," she said weakly. "I just wanted you gone. You were changing him, making him soft." Elias stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman who'd lived under his roof for 10 years. "You betrayed me." "You were already gone the moment she stepped through that door," Ruthie whispered, eyes shining. Eleanor stepped forward. "Get out." Ruthie looked at her, then at Elias, and left without another word. The door closed behind her like the final chapter of something that had never been whole. Elias sat down again, breathing heavy. Eleanor knelt beside him, tears on her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked at her, pain and fury swimming in his gaze. "You'd better be." Morning came hard. The light over the ridge was pink and unforgiving. Wind had scattered the night snow across the valley like spilled salt, bright, clean, and full of ill omens. Elias stood on the porch, rifle across his chest, arms still aching from the ambush. Every breath came shallow. He hadn't slept, and neither had Eleanor. She sat at the window with a pistol in her lap, eyes rimmed red, gaze locked on the tree line. They both knew Silas would come at dawn. He was a man of his word, especially when it was a threat. The first sign was the crows. Dozens of them lifting off from the pine ridge, squawking like the earth itself was about to split. Then came the riders. 4 this time. Not just men. They were executioners, dressed for death. Silas rode at the front, his black coat billowing like wings. Elias stepped off the porch, boots crunching in the ice-packed yard. Silas pulled up just a few paces from him and dismounted. He walked forward, slow, hands empty, confident. "You had your warning," he said, eyes flicking toward the cabin. "You brought hell to my doorstep," Elias growled. "No," Silas said. "She did." Elias didn't flinch. "You don't lay hands on her again." "I'm not here to talk." "Then don't." And just like that, it happened. One of Silas's men drew first. Elias fired. The shot cracked through the air like lightning tearing open the sky. One rider dropped, face first into the snow. Then chaos. The second rider returned fire, striking Elias in the thigh. He went down hard, groaning through gritted teeth, but he dragged himself behind the water trough and kept firing. Eleanor kicked open the cabin door and laid down cover fire with the pistol. She hit one rider in the shoulder. He screamed and spun off his horse. Only Silas remained upright, crouched near the well. His eyes burned. He saw her, and charged. Elias screamed her name as she raised the pistol. Click. Empty. Silas grabbed her by the coat and threw her into the snow. He pinned her down, fist raised. "I told you," he snarled. "You're mine." But then, a blur behind him. Elias, limping, bleeding, holding the revolver Ruthie had left behind. One shot. Silas staggered. Another. He fell to his knees, blood blooming across his chest. Eleanor scrambled free, backing into the snow, sobbing. Elias stood over Silas now, gun shaking. "You don't get to haunt her anymore," Elias said. Silas coughed, blood on his teeth. "You think you're better than me?" "No," Elias said. "I just ain't afraid of dying, right?" He fired the final shot. Silas slumped forward into the snow. The wind howled. Elias collapsed beside him, clutching his leg. Eleanor crawled to him, sobbing, pressing her hands to the wound. "I've got you," she cried. "I've got you." He looked up at her, face pale, voice faint. "You'd better." The fire crackled in the hearth, soft and steady, as snow flurried outside like falling ash. Elias lay on the cot, leg wrapped tight with linen and pain. His shirt was off, chest rising and falling with slow effort. Eleanor sat beside him, her hands red from cleaning blood, her eyes too dry for more tears. Ruthie was gone. The men who rode with Silas had either died or fled. The storm had passed, but what it left behind was ruin. She pressed a wet cloth to his forehead. He winced. "You always this gentle?" "Only with men who take bullets for me," he smirked. "Reckless thing to do." "I know." They were quiet a moment. The only sound was the wind teasing the cabin walls. Then he said, voice raw, "He had your whole life in his grip." She nodded. "You never told me everything." "I didn't think I'd ever have to," she whispered. "Thought I could outrun it, outlive it." "You can't," Elias said. "Not something that deep. You've got to burn it out." Eleanor looked at the fire. "He married me when I was 17. Bought me from my father, if I'm honest about it. Said I was soft-spoken. Said I was pretty. Said I'd be easy to shape." She swallowed. "I tried to leave once before. Ended up locked in the root cellar for 3 days. I swore I'd never try again." Elias closed his eyes, but not in sleep. "Then why now?" Her gaze dropped to her hands. "Because this time, I was pregnant." The silence shattered. Elias opened his eyes slowly. She went on. "He found out. Said the child would be raised his way or not at all. I lost the baby before I ever got the chance to leave." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I buried it alone," she said, "next to the river behind the house. Marked it with a stone he never noticed missing. That was the day I stopped being afraid of him, and the day I started hating myself for staying." Elias reached for her hand. She let him take it. "You don't owe that man one more second of your story," he said. "Not after today." She looked at him. "Then what do I do?" "You start over. Here, if you want." Her voice cracked. "With you?" "With me. Without me. Doesn't matter. Just start." She nodded slowly, lips trembling. "And you?" "I'll be here," he said. "Long as this leg don't rot off." She managed a broken smile. They sat in silence, her fingers resting on his chest, feeling the slow, steady thump of his heart. Outside, the snow fell heavier now, blanketing the blood, the tracks, the wreckage. It covered everything, like a mercy. The spring thaw came slow, the way healing does. Snow melted into the earth like forgotten sorrow, and the trees near the cabin dripped steady from their branches, soaking the frozen ground below. With each day, the fields reached a little greener. With each night, the cold lost a little more of its bite. Elias stood at the edge of the pasture, cane in hand, legs stiff but holding. The sun warmed the crown of his hat. Wind tugged at his coat and carried the scent of wet soil and fresh pine. Behind him, Eleanor walked through the gate, carrying a basket. Her steps were quiet now, but sure. She wore her hair tied back, sleeves rolled to her elbows, and she looked more like herself than she ever had in her life. Or maybe, for the first time, she finally was herself. Thought you might want lunch, she said. Elias turned, took the basket. Did you make those biscuits again? I tried. No promises. He smirked. If they're terrible, I'll lie. I'd expect nothing less. They sat on a felled log near the fence line, the same place where he first saw her all those weeks ago, half frozen, half broken, and fully tangled in his life. Now she sat beside him with color in her cheeks and a steadiness in her voice that made his chest tighten. Got a letter yesterday, Elias said, tearing off a piece of biscuit. From who? Sheriff down in North Fork. Said Silas's holdings are being picked over. Some of his property's up for auction. Said there was land, horses, a place someone could disappear into or start over with. Eleanor looked at him sideways. And? I ain't going. She waited. I realized something, he went on. I don't need new land. Don't need a fresh start. Just need to make this one mean something. He looked at her then. No more running. For either of us. Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. You think it's that easy? No, he said. But I think it's worth trying. A silence hung between them. It wasn't heavy this time. It was sacred. I don't need promises, she whispered. Good, he said, because I'm not offering any. She blinked, confused. I'm offering a vow. He reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of leather string. On it was a small silver ring, bent, worn, but whole. This was my mother's, he said. She said when a man gives this to a woman, it's not a symbol, it's a warning. Eleanor smiled, curious. A warning? That loving a cowboy ain't ever simple. We break things, we lose things, but the ones we keep, we protect with our last breath. He slipped the ring onto her finger. She didn't speak, just leaned into him, forehead against his shoulder. The fire inside the cabin burned low. The wind swept smoke from the chimney into the sky. And in that silence, with nothing but breath and warmth and memory, two broken people held on to something whole. If this story pulled you in and kept you holding your breath till the last word, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want more gritty Western love stories packed with honor, betrayal, and heart, subscribe to Saddlehorn Stories now. You won't want to miss what's coming next out on the range.